I have taken a lot of guidance and advice from coaches and mentors, but my advice to anybody, if I was talking to that person back then, is listen to your own inner wisdom and your own moral compass, right? Honestly, you do have within you everything you need to be successful in your business because you have values. And that's why I moved towards consent-driven marketing, because the aggressive marketing styles that I was being taught did not sit with my values. So for me, I would say come back to that inner wisdom and inner guidance and go from there. Make your decisions about your business and your life from there.
You're listening to Brainwork Framework, a business and marketing podcast brought to you by focus-biz.com.
Welcome back to another episode. With us today is Bev Roberts. She is the Holistic Business Mentor with her company Living Fabulously. They teach heart-focused marketers how to use a signature quiz so you can start building a lead generation system and lead prospects to the right products at the right time. Bev, so excited to have you on today. How you doing?
I'm really great. It's early in the morning for me, and I believe it will be later in the evening for you.
It is. Good morning. We appreciate you taking the time. But we always like to ask our entrepreneurs, tell us about your journey. What were you doing before that kind of led into the business that you have today?
A great question, because I've got an interesting story to tell. I was an award-winning executive in a global company, and one of my things was using my master's degree in business strategy and transformation to make a big impact on businesses. But I found I was very lonely at the board table as a female, and it was exhausting. To be honest, I'm talking back several years before perhaps there was some evolution and acceptance for women at board tables. And what I did do, though, is I took all that sort of skill and knowledge of transforming businesses into profitable ones and started my own consulting business. But the habits don't die easily. So that way of working extended hours and those kind of things. But I loved it because I had influence over the executives that I worked with. So I was working mainly with blue chip in Australia, big publicly listed company executives, and getting them to lead from a point of human way of leading, not just about profit, not just about people. You can get opposite ends, overly people oriented and then under focused on profits, but trying to get that balance right. Also led a lot of companies through the global financial crisis into optimizing their businesses. But I think that the testing thing then was, you're going to like people, but what are you going to stop doing? And for me, it was always, how do we manage that person as a whole being and support them transition to what they need to do? So it was very rewarding, but also challenging in a lot of ways. But I loved it because I never took gigs that didn't report to the CEO, because often there's so much politics and you get involved in a business that it stops progress. And I don't know if it's fortunately or unfortunately, a invisible chronic illness stopped me in my tracks. And I lost my cognitive function and my ability to talk and my ability to process. So that meant that my livelihood as a business consultant was basically done and dusted. I couldn't function. So I had to exit the big project I was working on to take care of myself. I think it was a big wake-up call in terms of executive burnout that I'd probably been going through. The stage was right for me to create that in my own life. It was a lesson, and I learned very much. But what I did is I navigated these past 10, 12 years. What is my mission? What is my purpose? Why am I here? And can I do this in a different way? And I had a lot of time spent retraining my brain. And one of the things I did was to study as an integrative health coach, because I thought my coaching skills were inherent. They just were part of me. I didn't have to think about it, but I couldn't remember anything. I couldn't call common objects, like pass me the thing, and that would be the salt. I wouldn't remember what it was called. So it was a long journey back to myself, but a good one in hindsight. And what I did in that moment was, my doctor said to me, you are very different to most of the other people that I treat. And I think you should write a book. And I thought, well, there's a challenge. I can't even remember anything. I can't write coherently. I can't speak coherently. So I decided that I would use mind mapping, which is a beautiful technique of bypassing words and things. So you sort of just jotting ideas. And I took that and I used speech to text. And I basically dictated a book that became a bestseller. So my book, Hope in a Dark Tunnel, it was about navigating an invisible chronic illness and back power. Because a lot of times when you're really unwell, you throw your power into the hands of the medical team who are taking care of you. And what I realized, that wasn't going to help me. It was going to hinder me. So I made a very practical book, and it still sells today. I find it quite interesting that sometimes I get these little royalty checks for the books that are selling today. But in 2020, we all know what happened in 2020. I got that urge. I thought, how can I sit back and watch other people lose their livelihood when I know exactly how to take a business online, bricks and mortar business, and take them online? So I basically pivoted from integrative health coaching and focused primarily on helping coaches and practitioners get their businesses online. The only people I couldn't help were anyone that was touch therapies, like massage therapists or chiropractors or those kind of people. And I feel that it's united back that passion of creating solutions in business, because that was my signature. I could problem solve my way out of any dark basket. It sort of really ignited that for me. Now I specialize in consent-driven marketing and list growth. And you mentioned in my intro that I teach people how to use a signature quiz, because it's not only a great lead generation system, but it also gets you to intimately know who your audience is. And then you create unique content that actually meets them where they're at. And the most important thing, because we're all in business and we're in business to make money, is that you make more sales consistently. So it's a cool journey, and I'm really passionate about making a difference.
Bev, that is such an incredible journey. I loved you sharing that, and just to hear some of the obstacles and challenges that you had to overcome, even when things seemed so bleak, and just how you were able to overcome that. Truly incredible. And now you're helping to solve more problems here. I was going to ask if you were still doing that type of human focused services for those other businesses, because immediately in my mind, there's so many American companies here that desperately need that to focus more on the human being and how do we invest in them. But instead, that's not their viewpoint. But I'm so glad that you can still be proactive and still bring your knowledge and wisdom to share with everybody else now. And I love this idea of the quiz, because it's giving some insights into a potential buyer. I almost feel like you don't even need the content yet until you get some feedback from the quizzes, right? You don't have to have a big content structure built out yet. You could learn from the quizzes and then create the content. Do you think that's a fair strategy to go for? Or do you like to look at it in a different way and kind of pre-build their content structure first?
I think, Chris, you hit the nail on the head. That is one of the nuggets, right? Because what I've observed is that we are driven to produce content. So we think what people might want, and we think of offers that people might want, and we think of courses that people might want, but we have no basis on which those would be consumed, those would be sold and make money. So obviously you have a position, right? You're a specialist in some area. You want to share your wisdom and your knowledge. And you know that there's certain types of people that you would be able to support. What I've found with a quiz is that you're not doing the one size fits all marketing. So what happens is when you start in business, and I'm also a proponent of, you do not need a website to start selling, because it takes time to evolve your messaging. It takes time to really land in that niche where you can make the biggest impact and make the biggest transformations. So I would say if somebody was in the startup phase of their business, get clear on who you want to serve. Some people call it an avatar, and go beyond the traditional things. So we don't just want to know their age. We don't just want to know the demographics around them. but we want to know more about them in terms of what you can serve. There's no use getting general knowledge about the person. We also want to know what the psychographics are, the way that they make decisions and those kind of things. So, for example, in my business, what I'm able to do is to look ahead and say, okay, I have 3 areas in my business that I am wanting to focus on. I focus on startup businesses. I focus on businesses who are going through some growth, and I'm start focusing on businesses who are scaling. If I just do a general lead magnet, I don't know where that person sits. And obviously, they may be on this continuum. So for any business, they don't usually only offer one thing. So what we want to do with a quiz is to highlight where is somebody on the client journey as a business entrepreneur taken, right? So it's not about general business. And it just allows you to really get to understand that person. So I think that was a very great observation of yours.
I love your approach to building out the quiz specific to them because, like you said, their business name or their age doesn't tell you anything about how they need to be helped or what you can market to them. It's actually irrelevant at that point. I feel like you really need more in-depth knowledge about where they're at in the buyer's journey with the avatar or who they might be like. All great advice because we're all always trying to seek validation. We build out these products that we think are going to fit. We spend all this time building it out and we never even ask our ideal audience what they think or what would be helpful to them. So no website needed to get product validation. Just go out there and start asking people, what do you think? And when you get them involved in the process, you get that insight from all of those customers and clients or potential prospects that you might have.
Correct, because what somebody needs from me when they're in startup versus when they are scaling with large launches of courses or something like that is quite different. So my content and my approach to them is different. For example, if I choose to only work with one end of that spectrum, that would be easy. I could just go, okay, let me create a quiz that's designed to really identify in the first stages of business, where are they at? I'm sort of macro, I'm sort of coming back out and going, how far have they got in their business journey? And then, for example, when I talk about list growth, when we talk about the startup phase of business, what I'm trying to identify is what is the quick win that audience of theirs needs if they're in the startup phase. But just a good example of a quiz, and it's not necessarily related to stages of business, is one of my clients is a psychotherapist, and she specializes in highly sensitive people. So she knows that there are specific traits that identify if you are a highly sensitive person. We created a quiz with her that demonstrated how much you identify with these traits. And what we realized is the top percentiles were exactly her ideal audience. She could support them because they have not yet had any support or they haven't taken any action yet to address the sensitivity. The ones in the sort of middle percentiles were those that have probably started some work and they've done some things and they've supported themselves in some way. But the bottom percentile, and I think we made it as low of about from 50% below, are not her audience. They are absolutely not her audience. So we didn't invite them after they took the quiz. We just said, you're such a great, resilient person. Keep up the great work. Keep doing what you're doing. And we didn't invite them to join our list because we've got the other two segmented. She knows those who are exactly right for her therapies and those who are possibly need more group work now. Maybe they've moved beyond just one-on-one. So it's a great way to really identify your audience and then where are they at? And then how do you serve them? How do you support them with the offers that you make?
Well, that is brilliant. And just think about the cost saved. Half of the marketing list that people would traditionally market and send all these emails to are completely off the list now. They've already been pre-qualified or disqualified. And now you have a much better list to work with. That's going to increase your conversion rates and just going to save a lot of trouble with all your marketing. And when you build out these quizzes, not to say a set template, but tips and tricks for the guidelines on how you structure it. Is it like it has to be a minimum of 7 questions and no more than 15? Or is there a structure that you like to follow that typically kind of works best for people being honest and going through the stages?
First of all, you need to work out the format of the quiz. So what end result are you looking for? Are you looking for, like that example of mine that I gave you? I'm looking for a category type quiz, right? Which category do you belong to? Are you a startup? Are you just growing? Or are you scaling? Whereas with that particular example with the psychotherapist, she was doing what I would call an assessment style quiz. That's the format, because we were assessing where they're at. So a lot of health practitioners are interested on the continuum of where they're at. Some of my clients will look at things specific to areas of life or areas of business. She deals with people who are in the third act of life. There are mature citizens, mature women who are thinking like, what now? Got retired. So she's looking at areas of their life that could improve. It's also an assessment type, but it shows where she needs to focus her efforts and support them more. So format is number one. You need to choose the correct format for that. The other thing is with questions, somebody will keep answering questions. So you need enough questions to get the result that you need that could support that person, but you minimize the number of questions. So I would say no less than 8, but probably no more than about 20. And that's just general and it's not prescriptive. But if you can ask 8 really succinct questions that would categorize people, you'd ask the question. And then if I was doing a category style quiz, I would have, say, 4 or 5 categories that I'm looking at, and I make statements that people will then align to. Whereas if I'm doing an assessment quiz, it's more, well, how much does this sound like you? Is it 100%, 80%, or strongly agree, strongly disagree, those kind of things. So you use different kind of ways of positioning the quiz. But there's also, in terms of quiz design, and what I didn't mention, in the dark ages, I did statistics in my undergraduate degree, and there's a particular way to write a question so that you get an outcome that you really need. There's an art and science to designing a quiz. A lot of people will look at the fun aspect of a quiz. That's why people like to take quizzes, but it's more about the design. So you get the design. There's 3 elements to the design. It's format, the way that you style the questions, and then it's sort of positioning. Just an aside, but whenever you use odd numbers in a scale for quizzes, people will fence it. It's a natural phenomenon. So if I have 3, they'll often sit in the middle. If I have 5, they'll sit on 0.3. So it's people who want to hedge their bet. They often will sit in the middle. So you will definitely be using even numbers. So there's no fence sitting. That's about quiz design.
That is so fascinating to hear just some of the psychological and behavior considerations when building quizzes and how we kind of ask questions, because you're right, depending on how we ask a question, we could alter the outcome. So if we're looking for true feedback, or are we trying to nurture them to provide a certain answer, it's just something that we need to keep in mind. But I love the way you reverse engineered it. What's the outcome you're trying to achieve? And then that's how you build no more questions than you need to ask, but enough where you're actually get a really good idea, a big picture look at what kind of problems that they're going through.
Yeah. And I feel that if it's easy for them to point, click, they could answer 20. So with the hypnotherapist, the psychotherapist, she had 20 traits, but it was easy. Either strongly identify or I don't. So it was very easy. You wanted the quiz to take at least no more than 5 minutes, right? Because people have very short attention spans nowadays. I always start with more and then get people to take the quiz before you've published it to the general public. And then you get some feedback and they go, well, I've had enough. That's really useful information, because actually question 10 was the Difficult questions. Having got that experience, I don't do that as much anymore. But with my clients, if you think that's really important, test it. Always test it. And then you're going to get the answer. And this is the other thing I find with quizzes. A lot of people said is, please, when I did my first set of research around why I wanted to focus down on quizzes. And I said, what do you dislike the most about quizzes? And they all said, without fail, the deception. I said, what do you mean? And they said it in different ways. Well, either you ask me for my email address up front and I don't know what's coming, or I'll happily do the quiz. And at the end, to get my results, you ask me for my email. So I've actually designed a protocol and format that I don't do that. So it's secret sauce. So I can't talk about all the details, but basically I give them a small subset of the result with an invitation.
I love that. Some great practical insights into how we should be building it out without giving it all away. Because of course you have to keep some of the secret sauce within, because that's the benefit to working directly with you, not just for quizzes, but I feel like the plethora of business and marketing experience that you bring to the table. Can I ask kind of just a generic business question? So there's lots of talk right now, 2025, about an impending recession, right? A lot of uncertainty. What should businesses be focusing on right now to kind of weather the storm? Do you think they should be taking a certain approach? Should they kind of lower their overhead? Should they kind of go a little bit further?
I think it depends on the kind of business, number one. So, for example, as we worked out in 2020, when businesses were face to face and in person, they could not operate, right? So, if the market conditions change, I think you need to create enough variety in your business that can weather that. So, for example, if you are location based as a business now, I would actually, as a recession proofing, instead of shrinking in and cutting costs, that would be sensible to do at any time. But I would be looking at how can I get my business online and service more than my own local area. And for example, if somebody needs a license to operate in another state, well, maybe that's worth it, but maybe you haven't actually looked at what's just in your further than your own front yard. So how could you take your business online? Because it's incredible how successful you can be. I've always had a blended business, and now I've gone only to online. So you can have in-person and online business, and also think about things that are not just discretionary spend. So what is it in your wheelhouse? What are you an expert at that is not just discretionary feel-good spend? What is imperative to living a full and rich life, having a business that is successful through a recession? So I think you've got to think a little differently. And I would say it's always good practice at any time to work out what I call our money leaks. So look at the things you've paid, subscriptions you're paying for that you do not need anymore. You've either outgrown them or something better came along and you bought that. So do that at any time. But I think in a recession, you've got to think of the big picture of how can I best service people that it's not discretionary spend. So a lot of us are multi-passionate, right? We don't just do one thing. That's why I was saying, well, I had just started getting my brain retrained by doing integrative coaching. But I know that deep inside me, streamlining and supporting business growth is where I'm at. That's where my passion is at. So find that thing, even in your current business, and just zone in on something and extend it beyond. If you're already in an online business, I would say look beyond your own state, your own country, those are the things. Consider the time zones. So for me, my audience is Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the USA. And there are times of the year where it gets a little challenging because obviously the time zone changes. And I'm in a state in Australia where we do time zone changes. So sometimes it gets a little bit tricky, but it's still doable. I belong to courses and masterminds in the States. And yes, sometimes I am up at 6 a.m., And sometimes my audience are up at 8 p.m. So it depends, but you can work that out. I'd say extend, don't contract. That would be my message.
It's so funny because I was kind of leading towards being more cautious and should we contract a bit and be a bit scared and hold on to our money? And you're like, no, this is the time to expand, time to grow. If you're not doing this, try this and think about expanding. Honestly, I think that's the right approach because I was just sitting here scared. But now this should be something that boosts our confidence to help us just go further.
Mm. And it's not that you're going to spend more money. So if you think of it, the tools of my trade are a calendar that has time zones that change when the person books. So it's booked in their time zone. I set up that calendar to say, this is my availability in my time zone. And I make sure that there's flexibility. I don't want to work with Europe because it requires me to work at night in my time zone. So you'd have a tool that's a calendaring system, scheduling system that allows for you to and pay, right? Book and pay, book in my time zone, pay would be the first tool I'd definitely have. A tool like Zoom. We're using Zoom today. Have a tool like Zoom that you can confidently get quality recordings, have one-on-one sessions and group sessions. And those two tools alone will be less than $50. So taking yourself from the in-person and extending your reach by having places elsewhere. Because, one of the things that I was doing at that time where everybody else was contracting, I was running virtual retreats. So I was using Zoom. I had a specific agenda that I could actually set, that there was some pre-work, and I did some one-on-one retreats and I did some small group retreats because I could manage 3 people, their businesses, their questions, and they loved the cross-pollination because they weren't competitive in the market and the idea generation. So think outside the box. I run this workshop in a venue. How can I turn it into an online event that would be very impactful for people beyond my own suburb, that kind of thing.
I love that, Bev. Absolutely. Now, where can people connect with you and find you online?
You can find me at bevroberts.com. And on socials, my handle is Bev Roberts Mentor. And I'm also on LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, just type Bev Roberts.
Absolutely. And for those interested, you can go down to the show notes and the description, and we'll have the direct links to Bev here as well. I wanted to ask, what are you looking forward to in 2025? Is there anything new or exciting that you're coming out with, or are you just kind of sticking with all the amazing stuff that you're doing currently?
Well, I'm relaunching your signature quiz course. And as we said, it's a way to attract your ideal audience and transform the way you create your content. And most of all, you're creating offers that will sell. So making more sales. I love running that course. I'm going to do a live round probably in April. And I'm really looking forward to getting that running again. I've got some ideas that I want to. So when you run something a few times, you kind of start getting, okay, I feel people are getting stuck here and there. So I'm excited to relaunch your signature quiz.
That is so exciting. And one thing you mentioned where people get stuck, I usually call that the friction in the buyer's journey, where it's like, I got stuck. And if you remove that friction, wow, suddenly that buyer's journey becomes so much easier. Suddenly they're scheduling calendar appointments, they're using your payment link, they're booking and just making things easier. So I definitely agree, utilizing a lot of the tools that we have and then instant customer feedback to improve everything that you built upon. Nothing needs to be perfect, right? We're always kind of adapting and learning as we go. So I love the approach that you have. Bev, wanted to ask, is there anything we haven't talked about yet? Just wanted to open the floor for you for any advice to entrepreneurs. Maybe if you had to restart your business today, what would be your approach and strategy?
I have taken a lot of guidance and advice from coaches and mentors, but my advice to anybody, if I was talking to that person back then, is listen to your own inner wisdom and your own moral compass, right? Honestly, you do have within you everything you need to be successful in your business because you have values. And that's why I moved towards consent-driven marketing, because the aggressive marketing styles that I was being taught did not sit with my values. So for me, I would say, come back to that inner wisdom and inner guidance and go from there. Make your decisions about your business and your life from there.
Got to trust your gut and your intuition and just take the feedback and things we learned from mentors and leaders that have come before us and use that to make better decisions. Bev, we appreciate your time and sharing your tips and wisdom with us. Appreciate everything. Congratulations.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for the opportunity.
Of course, it was a pleasure. Thank you.